tell him there once was another child who smelled this sweet and felt this warm, but he was taken.
Welcome. Thank you all for being here. This turnout is excellent. I'm Jennifer Caracciolo. I have the honor of working for the school system, and I'm just here to thank you for being here, and also to talk about our partnership with Congregation Beth Israel. In about, I think it was 2016 or 2017, I read in the Forsyth County News that we were getting our first Jewish congregation in Forsyth County. So I picked up the phone and called the congregation and met with this man named Rabbi Levi. And so we've had a great partnership since then from the school system. We hosted a virtual Holocaust survivor speaker in 2021. In the spring, if you come by FoCAL, you'll see daffodils everywhere. Once a year, we plant daffodils to recognize the children that were lost in the Holocaust. We also have a great project that we started last year that's called the ARC 180 project, and it focuses on acts of routine kindness, which we'll talk about later on during this presentation. So we really appreciate our partnership. We're excited to have you here. If you have family and friends that were not able to join us today, please tell them to visit the school system YouTube channel next week. We'll have this video available. And I'm going to turn it over next to Dr. Cooper. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. There's a bit of an echo sitting up on the stage. Is there an echo in the audience? Can you understand me okay? Was that a yes or no for an echo? No, so we're good. Okay. Some of this I'm going to read. Some of this is coming from the heart. So, some housekeeping things. We're on a tight schedule. If you've seen the advertisements out front, the kids are putting on a production of Legally Blonde. Great production. My granddaughter was in the performances a couple of years ago. But they need the auditorium once we're done. So once we break at the end of the evening, rather than sitting in the audience and talking to friends, if you would please exit, and we can schmooze in the anteroom there. Number two, almost the most important, other than Esther. The school system has been an incredible partner for us over these years. Dr. Jeff Bearden, we appreciate you. Jennifer, helping to coordinate everything that we do. And I'm surprised you haven't turned gray with some of the things we've asked of you. It's been a fantastic relationship. We look for continuing it in many decades going into the future. This year in Judaism is called the Unity Year, and that's part of what this program is about tonight. The Jewish high holidays are occurring in a couple of weeks, and one of the things that we do at the Jewish high holidays, because I know several members of the audience here are not Jewish, is blow the shofar. It's used as a religious symbol during holidays, but it's also used to stir our conscience. And really, that's what tonight's program is about, to stir our conscience. So if I could ask Rabbi Mentz to please come up and blow the shofar to get us started. And this is not easy to do because I've tried it. I would like to thank the sponsors for this evening. First, Dr. Joel Hoffman, in loving memory of his father, David Hoffman, a survivor himself of Auschwitz. May his memory be blessed. Georgia State Representative Brent Cox, who has been a great friend to the Jewish community, and in his words, he wants to donate in honor of being thankful to his Jewish and Israeli friends that we will continue to fight for each other for the right to live, worship, and work without hate towards Israel and Jewish people. Excuse me. And the other sponsor is my family. I'm going to try not to do this. In memory of my beautiful wife, Molly, who is actually the host in the Holocaust program that we did on this site 2 years ago. So, baby. So, tonight is not a Jewish program. They say that history repeats itself, where there are certain parts of history we don't want to be repeated. Holocaust is known as the terrible atrocities and murders of 6 million Jews. But there were over 11 million innocent Europeans who were also put in concentration camps, put in experiments, killed, tortured. So this is an educational program this evening, because without education, we cannot be aware, and without awareness, history may well repeat itself, and we can't permit that to happen. So in honor of the 6 million Jews, the millions of Catholics, Protestants, Seventh-day Adventists who were singled out because of their religious affiliations, because of people with disability that were sacrificed because they were disabled, because of gypsies who were singled out. This is for all of them. Again, not a Jewish program this evening, but a program for humanity. We can forgive, but we cannot forget. And now, I am so very pleased and honored to introduce Esther Basch and her daughter, Ruth Turret. They're going to tell you about her journey. We're having a video of this production, but another production in progress is that Esther is in progress about 2/3 of the way for her own production telling her story. So when you leave, there are donation flasks out front. So this program, it's important to get the word out, so we didn't charge for admission, but we are happily accepting any donations, which will be split equally between our synagogue, the school system, and Esther for her film product. One last thing, she's going to be giving the presentation. Then we're going to have, oh, I'm sorry. I told you this was off the top of my head. I'm skipping something. So before Esther gets the microphone, housekeeping again, there will be people circulating with questions. She'll be giving her presentation with Rachel's assistance. If you have any questions, people will circulate with paper and pad that you can write them, we'll collect them, and we'll bring them back up so that she can answer any burning questions that you have. Before we give you the microphone, we have a surprise for you. So please come up to the stage, County Commissioner Todd Levent, Randy and Maria Kaplan, and our dear Rabbi Mentz. That's what happens when I don't follow the notes.
So the rabbi called me. I'm Commissioner Todd Levent. Been in the county for 35 years now, approximately. And he asked me if I could get the Board of Commissioners to do a proclamation in honor of Esther Basch. And we did, and I had the honor of reading it out on the record The Board of Commissioners meeting on the 17th day of this month, August 2023. But I am going to hand the honor over to Mr. Kaplan and let him actually read the proclamation that we have done for Esther Basch.
Thank you. A proclamation by the Board of Commissioners of Forsyth County, Georgia. Whereas Peace, Goodness, and Kindness Day is dedicated to highlighting the positive potential of important unifying human principles to promote and spread peace, to do good deeds, and be kind to one another, to build a more compassionate community and bring people from all walks of life together. And whereas Esther Basch, who lived through the Nazi Germany occupation of her hometown in Czechoslovakia and survived the Auschwitz death camps during World War II, has made it her mission to share her story and her love of people, which helped her survive her harrowing life experiences and motivate others. And whereas, at the age of 95, Basch is committed to still spreading messages of love and perseverance as she travels nationwide and speaks on core lessons she learned as a child. Do good, love everyone, forgive, and think positively. Now, therefore, and be it resolved, the Forsyth County Board of Commissioners does hereby proclaim Thursday, August 24th, 2023, as Peace, Goodness, and Kindness Day, and urges all residents to spread peace, do good deeds, and be kind to each other, working together to create a more compassionate community and hopeful future for all.
Now, Esther, in addition to the very special proclamation, behind you, if you notice, there's something very special that we are doing in your honor tonight, is that we are unveiling, and we would love if you're able to participate in the unveiling of a new concept that will be going throughout Forsyth County called the Kindness Stations. The kindness stations filled with arcs. So if there's anyone that's able to come and help Esther unveil the kindness station. Esther, give it a look. Law, if you can help Esther unveil the new kindness station, the prototype, which is going to be going throughout Forsyth County. We will be noticing this everywhere. You may have to pull it around so the top doesn't come off. Join the movement of making kindness routine. Fill your arc routinely and give to the causes you love. By making our acts of kindness routine, we become kinder people and make our world a better place. Let's overflow Forsyth County with kindness. Esther, this is for you. Mazel tov.
What I believe very strongly, to be kind and loving. And no matter the race or the religion, I love everybody, and I love God, and I think positive, and I have a happy life at 95. Thank you. That's beautiful.
So, according to the agenda I was given, we're running 1 minute behind, which for Jews is not a bad thing. And as Esther said, she's 95. I wish I had her spirit and vigor at my age. And I introduced myself backstage before we got on, and I expressed to her how I lost my wife, and she lost her husband several years ago. She asked me out on a date. So don't keep her too late. We have plans. And everybody, Esther Basch.
Esther. Hi. So I'm rarely speechless, but I have to tell you that introduction left me pretty speechless. It's a beautiful thing. It's such a beautiful thing. I grew up, and whenever I went to my grandfather's house, he had something like this, and it was called a pishka. And he had them all over the house for every kind of charity you can imagine. That's one of our blessings, is to be able to give. And you've made that quite beautiful. So Mom and I have been traveling for some time doing this, and people say to me, oh, you're so nice to do this for your mother. Little do they realize, she drags me behind. I can't keep up with her. So we're here for twofold reasons. The first is because this story cannot die. It has to be told and retold. And unfortunately, time is taking away our witnesses to an event, one of the most horrific events in history, and we're losing the witnesses. We're losing both the liberators and the victims. I used to use the word, earlier someone used the word children that we lost. I always used to say that. I always used to say lost. But I don't say that anymore. I say what it was, murdered. All these children were murdered. All these adults were murdered. As he said, and it wasn't just Jews. There is no race or religion or group of people, for that matter, that have not at one time or another been a victim of abuse, a victim of prejudice. And that's what has to be wiped out. And Mom and I are trying to do our little bit by going around telling Mom's story and hoping that the message sinks in. Our main message really is forgiveness, because anger and hatred are luggage that none of us need. So this is what we do. The second reason is we're trying to raise funds for the film. So any generosity on your part would be very helpful. I grew up thinking that everybody was like my mother. I didn't know that everybody's mother didn't get up at 3 o'clock to finish her cleaning so that she'd be up to play with us kids when we woke up. I thought there was a fairy that came in the middle of the night to clean, but yeah. So Mom's gonna start with her story. She's gonna tell you about her childhood. And you take it, Mom.
Okay, so I grew up with a wonderful family, wonderful parents. I had a great childhood. I was climbing the trees. I was climbing the mountains. I was a very, very happy child until the Nazis came in 1942 in my hometown.
But explain to them about how the town changed.
Yes, the town changed. You see, we were all good neighbors, Christians, Jewish. We all helped each other in every way we could until the Nazis came in 1942. We had to put on a yellow Star of David. I was 14 at the time. I went next day to school, and the teacher saw my star, threw me out. I couldn't even finish the 8th grade. She says, "You're a dirty Jew. You're not allowed to have any higher education." I went home crying, and all of a sudden, all my Christian friends called me a dirty Jew. I did not understand at age 14 how I was clean yesterday and today I'm dirty. And they were torturing our Jewish people mercilessly. They were beating us up. My father was a rabbi and had a beard. They were tearing on his beard until blood was coming out. He had to go home, cut off his beard, which was very traumatic for him. And so we lived like that for 2 years, being tortured by our good friends that we were. We thought our good friends. The neighbor from the right came into the house, took whatever they wanted. But the neighbor from the left, when we got into the ghetto, called out my father in the middle of the night and threw a piece of bread over the fence. If he would have been caught, he would have been killed on the spot. But he risked his life. And so we were going on like this for 2 years until the Nazis decided to put us into a ghetto. They made a fence of like 4 squares, a street of 4 squares, and they put in all the Jewish people from the vicinity all over. And before we got into the ghetto, they told us to take our suitcase and pillows and quilts and took us into the main synagogue in my hometown. When we got into the synagogue, they took all our pillows and quilts and tore it open. The synagogue became like a snowstorm. I still have nightmares from that, how the synagogue became incredible. And after that, they took us into the ghetto. We were tortured mercilessly, no food, no water, beat us up, the Nazis. And after 6 weeks being tortured, they took us on a train, actually a cattle cars. They pushed us in, 500 people in one car. There was standing room only. If somebody died on the road, in the car, we had to hold them up. There was no room where to lay down. And I was holding hand with my mom. She was crying that my 16th birthday is coming, and she hid from the Nazis an egg or 2 every week so she could make me a 16th birthday cake. It never happened. On my 16th birthday, May 28, 1944, we got off the train at Auschwitz. Right away, they took my father to the right, which later I'm finding out straight to the gas chambers. I was still holding very strongly hands with my mom when a Nazi came, looked at us, tore our hands apart, and threw my mom to the right and took me into the barrack. It was a horrible, horrible barrack. We had bunk beds that we had to lay 12 women in one bunk bed. We were just pushing each other. There was no room. And if somebody was so hungry that fainted away, fell down, and it was just terrible, died on the spot.
So, yeah, you saw some incredibly horrible things in Auschwitz. I know that. But I usually stop, Mom, right about here to discuss the neighbors and the people and their personalities. Yeah. We would all like to believe from the bottom of our hearts that in the same situation, there is no doubt that we would have been that neighbor on the left that risked his life to go to the fence in the middle of the night to throw some food over the fence to their starving friends. But if you look at the reality of it, so Germany suffered quite a bit after World War I. And in fact, that's how Hitler was able to take a foothold, because they were all desperate and hungry. So he was able to talk them into his way of thinking. But if, picture yourself, you have a family, 4 kids, a wife, and you cannot make ends meet. You cannot support them. And a Nazi comes to you and says, and if you give me the location of a hidden Jew, you can have all their stuff. It's just not quite as black and white. As I said before, there is no group of people that have not been wronged, but sometimes we have to look at the circumstances, and maybe by looking at the circumstances is how we learn to forgive. Yes. And forgiveness is the main thrust of what we are talking about.
Yes. And so we were tortured in Auschwitz mercilessly. We had to kneel on racks until blood was coming out of our knees, beating up mercilessly. And
explain about.
They were racks, little racks.
But why were you kneeling on them? Why were you kneeling on the rocks?
Well, because we were being counted twice a day, morning and night, and if they weren't happy with how they were counted, we had to kneel on the rocks until they found everybody. Most of the time, people were so tortured and miserable that they went to the barbed wire, which was with electricity, and touched it. They didn't want to suffer anymore, but until they were found, we had to stay in line, 5 women in a row, until everybody was found.
Every morning and every night?
Every morning and every night.
That included the dead?
Yes. Many, many times I was so tortured that I went to the barbed wire. I figured if I'm going to touch it, I'm not going to suffer anymore. But in front of me came my parents' faces, and I couldn't touch it. What if they're alive and I'm not? I believe in God very, very strongly. I feel that He put my parents' faces in front of me, and I couldn't touch it. And we were standing in line for 3.5 months. I was there. And as we standing 5 women in a row, I was standing in line with 4 sisters from my hometown. The youngest was my best friend. And one day, Dr. Mengele, I don't know if anybody heard of him, he was called the Angel of Death. And he was walking twice a day and in the line, and whomever he looked at and he felt he wants to take him out, he did. We didn't know what was happening to them. But one day he stands in line in front of my line, and he pointed this horrible silver cane that he had. Whomever he wanted to take out, he pointed at them. And one day he points at me, which I thought it's me. And when he pushes the silver cane, he points it, which I thought at me. I step out of the line, and he takes this horrible silver cane, pushes it into my belly button, and pushes me back into the line. Sometimes I still feel this cane in my belly button when I have nightmares. And pushed me in, and they called out my best friend and took her away. When we went back to the barrack, this mean couple calls out, "Is there anyone that family was taken away by Mengele?" And their 3 remaining sisters says, "Yes, our little sister was taken away." And she, with this mean voice, points to the gas chambers, the chimneys, and says, "You see the chimney smoking? This is where your little sister is." Up till today, I have guilt feelings because I thought I was supposed to be there. But I think God had other plans for me. And we were tortured like that for 3.5 months. Then the Nazis decided to take women to the labor camps. I befriended in the meantime a very nice woman, 2 years older than I. Her name was Helen. And we became like sisters. And one day, we had to stay in line. They were taking us to the labor camps. When they did that, they put an incredible heavy barrier in front of the barracks because the barracks had no doors. And they left a small opening, and they looked at us, and whomever they felt they can go to work, they pushed them in. Whomever they felt they can't, I was like a skeleton after 3.5 months in Auschwitz. They looked at me and they pushed me away. So I was standing in front of the barrack crying. Now I lost my so-called sister too. And as I was standing there and crying, this incredible heavy barrier fell over. And of course the Nazis disappeared, and I snuck into the barracks. And this is why I don't have a tattoo. I wasn't supposed to be here. But God had other plans for me. By the time I snuck into the barrack, my so-called sister was taken away to a labor camp, and I was taken to a different labor camp. I was there for 9.5 months. I worked in an ammunition factory. I was the one that had to solder handles to the mines that they threw in the ocean for the ships to explode. Many, many times, you see, we were working 12 hours a day. Every 2 weeks, the shift changed, and we had to work 24 hours. I was so exhausted that many times I soldered my fingers to the mines, so I have no fingerprints anymore. But the United States were gracious enough to give me an American visa anyways, even though I could have been a criminal for all they know.
And do we know for sure?
But they gave me a United States visa in 1958. In the meantime, we were in that labor camp for 9.5 months, still having to stay in line to be counted and for food. And one day, and they gave us these army bowls for the food.
Like tin.
Yeah.
Tin bowls.
I think they call it a canteen. Something, I think, I'm not sure. But I'm standing in line one day for my food when this woman, her name was Ilonka, stands in front of me, and I see her bowl is already dirty. So I tell her, Ilonka, I didn't have my food yet. And she says, yes, but I'm still hungry. And I says, but I'm even hungrier. And we're arguing back and forth in Hungarian. When the Nazi woman comes, she didn't understand what we were arguing about, but she decided to beat me up mercilessly, so bad that I had to crawl back into my bunk bed, and I couldn't get up next morning. So there was a good capo in the labor camp, and when she saw I can't get up, she went to work for me to be counted, because otherwise they would have looked for me and would have taken me back to Auschwitz into the gas chambers. So she really saved my life. Her name was Branya, and I will never forget her. She worked for me for days and days until I was able to get up and go to work.
Tell them about years later and Branya.
Yeah, years and years later, when we already lived in the United States, in New York on Coney Island Avenue, my husband and I were walking on the street, and we see a bakery, a new bakery. My husband says, well, let's go and see if we can afford something. We go in, and there is Branya. And I call out, Branya. And my husband calls out, Branya. She lived in the same town that my husband was brought up. We were both very, very happy to see her. I think she gave us some cookies and didn't take money. Anyways, so
So Branya saved your life.
Yes, she did. Anyways, we were in that labor camp for 9.5 months until the American soldiers started coming forward. So the Nazis decided to take us what they called a death march, because many of us died on the road. No food, no water, walking for days and days until we wound up in another labor camp. Locked us in for 2 weeks, and this is where I found my so-called sister again. We were very, very happy, and for 2 weeks we were together, starving, but we were happy. After 2 weeks, as I say, the Nazis locked us in. After 2 weeks, the American soldiers came, shut open the gate, and said, "You are free. And go into town, take whatever you like." I didn't want anything. I thought, I'm going home, find my parents, everything. But I did pick up a big, big jar of honey.
Every time she tells this story, that jar of honey, 2 folds, 3 folds. I'm picturing a barrel of honey, you know, she's pushing a barrel.
I licked it up with my fingers. By the time I got back to the camp, I was deathly ill. The soldiers took me to the infirmary. I was there for 4 weeks. I was like in a coma. I didn't know what happened to me. But the soldiers called me the honey girl because I got sick from the honey.
And that's why the name of our film is The Honey Girl.
Years and years later, you want to tell this first? Okay, I'll let you.
Okay. So my granddaughter was 2. She's 18. So this is 16 years ago. And it was the 4th of July, and my husband, my daughter, and my granddaughter went to watch the fireworks in Chino Valley, Arizona, where we lived at the time. And we're sitting there, and the music, the patriotic feeling in the air, the fireworks, the music, all of it. My granddaughter's sitting there, and tears run down her face. She's not hungry. Doesn't need to be changed. She was moved. You could see that she was moved. Next day, I called my mother. I said, "Ma, you wouldn't have believed what happened last night." And I tell her about Jasmine. And she says to me, "Did I ever tell you about my first 4th of July?" I said, "No." Understand, I did not grow up with these stories. A lot of them I didn't hear. I heard them over the years, but I don't think I started hearing them till I was maybe 17 or 18. So she tells me about her first 4th of July. They were liberated April 14th, but the soldiers, the American soldiers, stayed until well into September. So of course, 4th of July came in, and being Americans, you know, there was lots of beer, and firecrackers, and fireworks, and music, and just celebrating patriotism, celebrating our freedom. And Mom says she had no idea what they were talking about because they didn't understand the language, but she was moved to tears.
Yes, yes.
So she says to me, if I could ever find any of those soldiers that liberated my camp, I would be so happy. So internet home computers had just come into vogue, but I was fascinated by them, and I looked, and I found that there was going to be a reunion of the 84th Division the following month in the Midwest, and there was a contact number. So I called the guy to ask if there was any way he thought I could find one of these soldiers. He said, I hate to disappoint you, but we have very few people remaining from World War II. You know, the 84th starts with 18-year-olds. So I'm afraid you're not going to be able to find anybody. I said, well, if I write a letter, will you post it on the wall? He said, absolutely. About a month later, the phone rings on a Sunday morning. I'll never forget it because it was just so impactful. And the guy says, hi, my name is Max Lieber. You don't know me, but you wrote this letter. I was stunned. I actually had to make my husband take the rest of the call because I was so speechless. And so Max was coming in a few, no, it wasn't a few weeks, it was a few days. He could not wait to meet Mom. So he had his daughter drive him from New Mexico to Phoenix, and I had the whole thing set up as a surprise for my mother. I thought to myself, what a great idea. My husband says to me the day before, he said, Rachel, you really think it's a good idea to surprise a woman in her 80s who has 7 heart stents? So I kind of had to rethink it. So, of course, all my family was there to witness this great event. But that included my 2 grandchildren, my 2-year-old and my 3-year-old. And so when Mom's around a baby, she's hypnotized. You can't pull her away. It's impossible. I can't get out of Walmart if there are some carriages in there. So anyway, so she's playing with the babies on the floor and the terrace. I said, Ma, I got to tell you something. She goes, oh, okay. Are they cute? Look what they're doing. I'm like, Mom, I really have to tell you something. Oh my goodness. And she was so distracted, I simply couldn't get her attention. Finally, I said, Ma, listen. And she said, what? I said, remember that soldier? And she said, oh, yeah. And she's still not there. And I said, he's coming tomorrow. And she goes, oh. I have a picture of her face when it sunk in what I had said. My husband had taken it. It's such a great picture. And she looks at me and says, like any Jewish mother, but there's no food in the house. We have to go shopping immediately. And we did. And Max came in the next day. And it was so joyous. There's no words for it. My sister Franny, who passed away a couple of years ago, who I miss terribly, Franny was a chatterbox. Anybody that knew my sister knew that you couldn't get a word in edgewise. My husband used to come home from work and see me standing on the phone like this, and he'd go, your sister. Yeah. So I used to say she was the only human being I knew that could speak on the out-breath and the in-breath at the same time. Quite a feat. So anyway, Franny runs to the door as I'm walking in with Max. Mom's in the kitchen trying to get to Max. Franny's in between going, oh, can't believe you're here. I can't believe. She just was chattering a mile a minute and wouldn't get out from in between them until I grabbed her arm. I said, Fran. Yeah. So they embraced and we became unbelievable friends. Yes. And we would go to New Mexico to see him. He would come to Phoenix to see us. One day.
Yeah. So we were going back and forth from Phoenix. He came to Phoenix, we went to New Mexico, and one day we're sitting at his living room and socializing, and he looks at me and he says, Esther, do you like honey? I says, not anymore. And he says, I know why. You're the honey girl. And this is why my documentary is called The Honey Girl.
And as an aside, if you look it up, make sure you punch in Honey Girl documentary. Because if you just punch in Honey Girl,
yes.
I guess I don't have to explain that one, huh? So, in fact, the last place we spoke and I said that, the rabbi said, not rabbi approved.
So anyways, when we were liberated and we were there until September, because the soldiers wanted to make sure that we are all healthy, when they opened the gate, we'll all look like skeletons. So they brought us back to health. And in September, you see, when I was born in the town, it was Czechoslovakia, although my mother tongue is Hungarian. And so the Czech people were the first one to take their Jewish people home. So they put me on a ship towards Prague, and from Prague I got on a train to Budapest, to the capital of Hungary. But there I had to get off the train, take another train towards my hometown. When I got off the train, the only cousin that survived of a family of 35 people was liberated first, so he came to the train station every day to see who's coming home, and I got off the train. He was very happy to see me, but he says, Esther, no use for you to go home. Nobody survived, and the Russians even took over your house, so you have nowhere to go. But I have a very good friend who's taking orphans from the camps towards Palestine. I'll introduce you to him, and he'll take you there, and he'll help you find our uncle. I said, okay. I had no other choice. So anyways, he took me into an organization called the Kibbutz.
Mama, how old were you at that point?
At that point, I was already 17, and he was taking orphans. He was 23 years old. He was taking orphans, 60 orphans, between ages of 12 and 18 towards Palestine then. And I was 17, so he took me along. But by the time we got to Palestine, 2 weeks later, Rachel was born.
You forgot the marriage part. Hang on.
Yes. You see, we were traveling a long, long time till we wound up in a displaced persons camp, which the United Nations took care of us. And we realized it's going to take a long, long time to get to Palestine. So we got married in that displaced persons camp. And the American soldiers gave us these jackets, see, and they gave us a blanket to sew me. The girls in the organization sold me a skirt because I was wearing a jeans. A bride shouldn't wear jeans. So the girls sewed me a skirt. The boys in the organization sold their rations of cigarettes for a month to buy me a piece of white material. After all, a bride should wear something white. So that is my wedding gown.
Was that the same? That wasn't the same displaced persons camp where you found out that you were pregnant, is it? Same one?
Yes.
You have to tell that story. I'm sorry. I have to twist your arm because I love this story.
Okay. So we were married for 3 months or so. And all of a sudden, a woman got a bicycle from next door. So I asked her to borrow it for me so I can show off my new husband that I know how to ride a bicycle. As I get on the bicycle and I holler out, "Joe, Joe, look." And as he looks, I fell down and I broke my knees. So they took me to the infirmary where there were German nurses, and I threw up. And the nurse says, "Are you pregnant? Are you pregnant?" I didn't understand. But they had a Hungarian doctor on the 3rd floor. They took me up to him, and he says, "Are you pregnant?" in Hungarian. I says, "Why should I be?" And he looks at my finger. The United Nations gave us a very thin wedding band. And he says, "You're married." I says, "So?" He says, "So? What do you think you were doing?" I says, "I thought I was having fun." You see, in Europe, you didn't know the facts of life until the day you get married. Your mom takes you to her bedroom and tells you the facts of life. But sorry to say, I had no mother by then. So I really had no idea the facts of life. And
I make her tell that story every time because it just cracks me up. Especially when she says, "I used to be very naive." Yeah. And I just look at her. When did that change?
So when the kibbutz saw that I'm pregnant, they decided to take us first. They didn't want the baby to be born in Germany. So they took us on a ship to France. From France, they took us on a ship towards Palestine. We were on that ship for days and days and days till we finally got to the port of Haifa. We already saw the beautiful lights. We were singing the Hebrew national anthem, the Hatikva, when the British found us, took us off by force from that ship, put us on another ship, and took us back to Cyprus. We didn't want to get off the ship to go to another ship, but they threw tear gas into the ship and took us off by force and took us to Cyprus.
You've told me how Cyprus looked when you got there. Tell them how Cyprus looked when you got there.
Oh, it was still with barbed wires, although not with electricity, but still barbed wires. I was watching the Greek man carrying this incredible, beautiful banana trees on their shoulders. And being I was pregnant, I craved a banana so bad that when we finally got to Israel, to then Palestine, and my husband already had 3 brothers there, and when he went to look for them, and he found them, they were very happy. And one of the brother-in-law says, "Well, let's go see your new wife." And my husband says, "Not before you buy her a banana or 2. they brought a big, big bag, maybe 5 pounds of bananas. I took one banana, I open it, I take one bite, and I threw up all over the hut. I wouldn't touch a banana even today if you kill me.
Or honey. No banana, no honey.
No banana, no honey. When it comes Passover and I take a piece of matzah and I dunk it in the honey, I could hardly touch it. But I...
Mom, one other... Oh, you were going to tell them. And then you finally got taken to Israel.
Yes.
And then...
Yes. So finally, we got to Israel. And we were very, very happy. We were very poor. But we were very happy. I wasn't afraid of a policeman or anybody. You know, I'm in my home. It was amazing.
Did you forget something about getting to Israel? Did you forget something about when you got to Israel?
About this.
2 weeks.
Yeah. 2 weeks later, when by the time we finally got to Israel, 2 weeks later, Rachel was born.
I always refer to myself as chopped liver, and this is why.
So anyways...
You know, Mom, I wouldn't mind you going back and telling this story about Ilunka. We had so many incredible coincidences happen.
Miracles, yes. Anyways, after when the Arab-Israeli war broke out, my husband and 3 of his brothers went right into the army. Next day, my husband left me with a 15-month-old baby. The Arabs were right behind me, not even maybe a quarter of a mile away from where I lived. They came in the middle of the night calling out, "Jihad," and tried to kill us.
Yeah, that was another story.
Yeah.
So my father's in the army, Mom is alone with the 15-month-old, and the Arabs had set up a crossfire at both ends of the street.
Yeah.
So she had to run with the baby, who she dropped in the middle of the street.
Yeah, people picked her up.
Good thing,
and
right?
Locked me. Yeah, it was very difficult. Anyways, my husband had 3 brothers, and they all went into the army next day, and one of the brothers died. My father-in-law, who was already in Toledo, Ohio, sent us such sad letters. Please come to the United States. It is so hard to lose a child, which now I understand. I lost 2 children within the last 2 years. They were born 15 months apart, and they died 15 months apart. And so I really understand what my father-in-law went through. So finally, after a couple of years or so, my husband said, "Esther, we have to go to the United States." But we couldn't come straight to the United States. We had to live in France for 6 months till we got the Canadian visa first. So we went to Canada. We lived there for 6 years. And as I'm walking one day the streets, by then I already had 3 children. And as I'm walking the streets, all of a sudden I see this woman running away. And I holler after her, Ilonko, where are you running? That was the woman that I was beaten up because of her. And she says, you mean you're not gonna beat me up? I says, why should I? You were hungry, I was hungry, but now we have a belly full, both. And we became the best of friends. And we lived in, thank you. We lived in.
I don't know. I think we're supposed to keep an eye on the clock because of this. We're good? Okay. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm
Can I
sorry.
still continue?
You can continue.
Yeah. Anyways, in Canada, I already had 3 children, and I was still naive. So I'm going to my Hungarian doctor, and I says, listen, I have 3 children. We have a hard time supporting them. I cannot afford any more children. What shall I do? He says, drink lemonade. I says, when? Before or after? He says, instead, cool off. Yeah. Anyways, we lived in Canada for 6 years till we finally got the American visa in 1958. We came to the United States, to Brooklyn, New York.
To Brooklyn, yeah.
Yes.
I do, on a somber note, though,
Yeah.
and this is really important. I don't know if people realize, but you know, babies are born like a clean slate. They don't have prejudices. They don't have ill feelings about other cultures. I was 6 years old when we got to Canada. My mother told me that I had to tell the teacher the next day that I had to take off the following day because it was Yom Kippur, a Jewish holiday. So I did. I was 6. That was the day that people realized I was Jewish. And me, at 6, was personally responsible for the death of Christ. I drank the blood of Christian babies. I had horns they wanted to see. I was beaten after school every day until we left Canada years later. I never told my parents because even though they never told us the story, but in spite of that, I knew that there were so many things that were different in my house. If there was a knock at the door and somebody wasn't expected, you could see the terror on their faces, as you did with uniforms, as you did with dogs. There were so many things about them, and somehow I figured out it had something to do with being Jewish. So I never told them what was going on at school because I didn't want to add to their hurt. But these children, where would they have learned such a thing from? They would have heard it from their parents. They would have heard it from people close to them. And we really have to consider, if you don't mind my saying, we really have to consider what we draw into children's blank slates. We have to teach them love. We have to teach them acceptance. My mother has a T-shirt on the website. By the way, there are business cards there somewhere with our website where you can see a preview of the film we're working on, and where, if you want, you can always make a donation. There's a donate button. But yeah, there's a T-shirt there that you can buy, and what the T-shirt says on the back, it has the word bystander, but the BY is crossed off, and on top of that it says UP, upstander. Don't be a bystander, be an upstander. And that's what we need to teach our kids.
Yes.
So I hate to interrupt you, but as my family frequently reminds me, I'm wrong. We had 2 hours. I thought the 2 hours started ticking at the start of the program at 6:30. The 2 hours started when the doors opened at 6. So I know she has 80 years of stories. We could stay here for days. But the rabbi does have some questions from folks. While he comes up here, I don't want to sound like Georgia Public Television, but we couldn't do programs like this without your donations. So please, there are some bowls at each entrance and exit. If you don't have cash, you can look up our website, or you can look up Esther's website, and you can make donations directly there. We appreciate the fantastic turnout. The thread again is to learn, to educate, to be aware so it doesn't happen again. I never quite understood Nazi Germany. And this is something that we need to learn about, because you can have very charismatic leaders and they're going to lead you down the wrong path. So you had a little guy with ridiculous black hair and a silly mustache telling these Germans that because they're tall and blonde and blue-eyed, they're the superior race. Didn't he look in a mirror? He looked more like me than he did like the Aryans that he was promoting. So we're here to educate, to be aware, so history in this case does not repeat itself. I don't know if you have one or two more anecdotes you want to give before the rabbi gives you questions, and I apologize.
No,
I thought we had till 8:30.
I think we're good. The only thing I would like to add, there is also, wherever the business cards are, there's also a binder. I'm taking names and email addresses of those of you that would like to be updated on the progress of the Honey Girl.
You see, I would like one more thing to say. Sure. You see, when Steven Spielberg made that movie, Schindler's List, he took all the proceeds from that movie and sent out people from Hollywood to Holocaust survivors that wants to make a tape of their life. And my husband and I made a tape. And when the woman from Hollywood finished my story, she says, "Esther, how do you feel about the Germans today?" I says, "Well, I cannot forget the horror they put me through, but I can forgive. Because if I don't forgive, if I hold a grudge, I only hurt myself." This woman from Hollywood hugged me, telling me I was the first Holocaust survivor to answer her the way I answered her. But I believe it. I believe very strongly to be good. If you can't do anything good, don't do anything bad. Love all people, regardless of race or religion. Love everybody. Think positive, love God, and you'll have a happy life. Thank you very much.
Esther, you are an incredible woman. We can sit here and listen to you for hours and days and months and years. I mean, you remind me of my grandfather, and it's just a beautiful thing. But we have a few questions that came from the audience. If it's okay with you, we'll do like a rapid-fire questions, and very interesting, very intriguing, and we'll like rapid-fire. We'll do it real quick, and but they're fantastic, pointed questions. So, question number one, Esther, how did you continue to keep your faith in God through such horrible circumstances?
How did you stay your faith in God?
It was embedded in me from my parents. You see, I'm not very religious anymore, but I believe in God so strongly. I believe He had a purpose to stop me from touching the barbed wire. He had a purpose when that incredible heavy barrier fell over so I can sneak into the barrack. I believe in God so strongly that He keeps me alive. It's just something that I learned from my parents, to love God, to believe in Him, to believe in people, because there are good people in this world too.
That's beautiful,
And
Esther.
so I
And
believe.
about the believing in people, it's actually running into the second question that we got. How did surviving the Holocaust make you feel about mankind in general? People.
I feel good. I love all mankind, and it just makes me feel good. It warms my heart when I see good people in this world. And I believe very strongly all of you are wonderful just for coming here and listening to my story. It warms my heart.
That's wonderful. Esther, you know, Esther, I have young children, and many of the attendees here tonight also have young children. And this comes from a question from a young mom. This is the question, Esther. What do you think is the best way to teach the Holocaust in our school system from the ages of K through 12?
We speak to all ages, and I try to make it fit the audience. We once sat in a library with 100 12-year-olds, and you could hear a pin drop. And this was in New York, where people really do tend to live together regardless of race and religion. New York is a melting pot. And I'm talking to these kids, and what I talk about is bullying. We talk about being an upstander instead of a bystander, that we are all brothers and sisters and we have to watch out for each other. So it depends on the age level. Our favorite is high school students. They are fascinated with Mom's story. But the kids really react very well to being taught that.
That's beautiful. We got 3 more questions. It's a strong question, so do you feel, Esther, that your experience through the Holocaust can happen again in your lifetime?
Before she answers that, I have to admit that I really protect her myself from too much news, because there's so much bad news. So she doesn't really know a lot about what's going on. She knows that prejudice is on the rise, but that's about it.
Okay.
I don't know how, but I still believe in mankind. There's still good people in this world, and I'm not looking for people that are mean. I'm just looking at the good people.
We haven't found any mean people.
Yeah.
We've spoken to thousands upon thousands. We have never had a negative comment.
That is just beautiful. That is really something special, Esther. Second to last question that we got tonight. Today, how do you view Germany?
What do you think about Germany today?
Well, as I said before, I just cannot see myself thinking bad things. Prejudice, that's not my thinking. I live a happy life. I think positive. And besides, today's Germany is not like the Nazi Germany.
Just a quick aside on that is that Mom and I go dancing a couple of nights a week.
Yeah.
The good-looking guys walk right past me to ask Mom to dance.
95.
She loves the penny slots at the casino. And she said she gets a minute pension from Germany every month. What is it? $400, $300?
Sometimes that
Yeah.
depends on the
Yeah.
euros.
So she takes it from the Germans and gives it to the Native Americans.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
So our final question, Esther, the last one that came in. How pervasive do you think anti-Semitism is today?
How much anti-Semitism do you think there is today?
Well, I think there is still a lot of anti-Semitism, but I'm not thinking of that. I'm just thinking of good people.
It is not our experience.
You see, I leave the past behind me. I know it's there. I remember every second of my past. I don't remember what I had for breakfast today, but I remember every second of my past. But I'm not dwelling on it. I'm just leaving it behind me.
You can't even imagine the amount of love that Prescott gives to us. I mean, we walk into a restaurant, we ask for the check, oh, somebody just paid it. And I'm like, what? You know, because everybody knows Mom. She's
Esther,
very involved with the musicians and music. And
incredible. Yeah. Esther, you are truly the honey girl, dripping with love and sweetness wherever you go. What an inspiration. And ladies and gentlemen, let us give a round of applause to Esther Basch. And we want to wish you, Esther, good health, good wealth, and to have the strength to continue shining goodness and kindness and sweet honey to the entire world. Thank you, Esther, for coming tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming together this evening. God bless and good night. Thank you very much.